Good evening and welcome to the study session of the City Council of the City of Moreno Valley. The City Council receives a separate stipend for CSD meetings. I now call this meeting to order on May 13th, 2025 at 6:02 p.m. Pledge of Allegiance will be led by, would anyone like to volunteer? Councilmember Gonzalez will lead us in the pledge this evening.
Place your right hand over your heart and repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Councilmember. Next up, Madam Clerk, I'll turn it over to you for a roll call.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Bernard is absent today, and she does not wish to excuse her absence. And typically, excused absences only apply and pertain to the regular council meeting. So moving right along, Councilmember Gonzalez.
Here.
Councilmember Delgado.
Here, ma'am.
Mayor Pro Tem Santa Cruz.
Here.
And Mayor Cabrera.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Next, introductions, please.
Patty Rodriguez, City Clerk.
Paul Bradvica, Deputy City Clerk.
Stephen Quintanilla, City Attorney.
Brian Mohan, City Manager.
Lana Jimenez, Assistant City Manager of Administration.
Felicia London, Deputy Finance Director.
Angelica Fraustilipo, Community Development Director.
Sarah Mack, Police Chief of Police.
Robert Cardenas, Human Resources Director.
Jeremy Bubnick, Director of Parks and Community Services.
Melissa Walker, Director of Public Works.
Thank you very much, team. And is that a new order that we have going on? That's a permanent thing? Okay, all right, we'll get used to it, Letter E, public comments on matters on the agenda only. Madam Clerk, do we have any requests to speak?
We do, Mayor. They're coming.
Understood. We'll give it another minute or so.
Thank you. And Christopher Baca is our speaker for the evening.
Good evening.
Good evening again, staff, community, and elected officials. I'm not really sure if you're going to have a PowerPoint presentation, but I tried going online to see if you would have any information as far as what capital improvements you're going to be referring to or speaking of. And I also wanted to ask a question as far as capital improvements. I suppose it would be under the purview of capital improvement on the agenda, but I also would like to know how, I've asked before, how items get put on capital improvement to be improved by the city, and I'm referring to projects that have been approved, and yet years later, you're not following those agreements, and suddenly it's changed. And I'm referring to the WLC and Alessandro and Eucalyptus. How is it that they have agreed, they have an agreement, and then the city suddenly years later agrees to put in the infrastructure? That's my question. Particularly, I'd like answers. How is it that Alessandro, Eucalyptus too, but particularly because it was recently put on there on Alessandro, and I asked our new city manager, and he stated that it's always been, but it hasn't always been. It was Alessandro was a big issue on an agreement for the WLC, and it was part of the WLC. Now, why is the city improving that, or going to improve that, or taking that back? That's my question, and I would like answers. Thank you.
Thank you.
That completes all of public comments, Mayor, on items on tonight's agenda.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. With that, we'll go ahead and move into item F, business. We have one business item, that's F1. And I'll go ahead and turn it over to our city manager, Brian Mohan, to get us started.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, council members. Tonight is just a presentation on the capital improvement plan that is going through staff review and various approvals from Planning Commission, Financial Subcommittee, as well as then ultimately coming back to the council sometime in June for adoption and approval. At this particular point in time, Melissa Walker, the Public Works Director, will provide the presentation, which is a PowerPoint presentation and will be available as official record of tonight's meeting.
Right. Good evening, Honorable Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and Council. Tonight I will provide you an overview of the Capital Improvement Plan. The city's capital improvement plan is done in coordination with the budget every 2 years. This is the documentation of needed public improvements, repairs, and upgrades that become funding requests. This process helps provide a 5-year snapshot and long-range infrastructure planning. Looking back at our last capital improvement plan for reference, the 2-year total of new funding was $51.9 million. And there was over $2.4 billion in unfunded projects. The largest funding sources were capital project reimbursements, gas tax, utility revenues, development impact fees, special districts, Measure A, and technology services assets. Looking at what was funded in the last CIP, here are some of the project highlights, including the senior center expansion, the traffic signal upgrades, and the park rehabilitation and refurbishment program, among others. So the improvement plan covers a variety of types of projects, everything from streets and highways and buildings to utilities and parks. A lot of work goes on behind the scenes to get the CIP put together. The basic process starts with gathering requests from city departments. Those requests then go through a vetting process to determine available funding. Some projects have outside or specialized funding, while others may remain unfunded if no funding sources are identified. Then there's a public hearing followed by adoption of resolutions which authorize adjustments to final CIP and the operating budget. So how do we go about selecting and prioritizing projects? Well, there are city priorities through the general plan and various strategic plans. There are also department priorities based on master plans, feasibility studies, and needs assessments. Safety is often a factor, whether it's better roads or reducing response time for police and fire. And then, of course, funding sources are a very big part of prioritizing. Some projects have restricted funding, others might have grant funds. So looking at CIP requests that we received for this new cycle, the current draft of CIP has over 137 million in identified needs. The top 3 categories are electric utility, streets and highways, and buildings. As mentioned, the capital improvement plan is done in coordination with the budget every 2 years. Looking at available funding by source helps to determine which projects can move forward. This also ties back to restricted funds, since these funds can only be used for certain projects. Similar, for instance, gas tax and SB1 funding can only be used for certain roads. DIF, police, DIF, fire can only be used on those type of projects. This chart shows the requests broken down by council district and category. It also shows citywide projects that cover multiple districts. And finally, here's a sample of the needs for city build-out. For example, Pavement rehabilitation requires $10 million per year to maintain current pavement condition index. $114 million are needed for a new library with youth center and senior center. The animal shelter expansion is estimated to cost $8 million. $55.5 million are needed for new fire stations, and the list goes on. With that, we will be bringing the full CIP document back to you for adoption June 3rd. Please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Walker. Appreciate the report there. So we'll go ahead and bring it back to the dais and open it up to questions, comments. Councilmember Delgado.
I have a question, Miss Melissa, on the list. So, yeah, can you go back to the
Yes.
list?
The last one.
Ca- Okay, there, that's fine.
Okay.
How does something get bumped up? Say, for instance, we have a severe need to expand the animal shelter, right? It's a severe need. It's not even a want, actually. It's like, ooh, it needs to be done. So how does that get like prioritized to the top? I mean, do we do that as a group, or do you like say to your city manager, this has got to be a priority? The city manager then says, okay, let's work on where we're going to get the funding, works on that, and then brings it to us. Similar?
Yeah, yes, I was going to say, Brian, I think Brian was going to answer that one.
Yes, council member. So if you recall one of the slides where she broke down the various city priorities, departmental priorities, and so forth, and needs assessments and so forth. So when it comes to facilities has a master plan, as well as they have an annual maintenance program, and they identify based on the useful life of any of our facility assets, what needs to be maintained, what is critical, what is non-critical, what is, very similar to payment condition index. Melissa mentioned that we need 10 million just to maintain the PCI that we have today. That's not bettering it, that's not making it worse. So very similar to any of these particular assets, it is the expertise of the individuals within that sphere of department or division that provides us what we need to make decisions. And from a facility standpoint, that is why we also then build reserves in facility reserves, technology services, all of the ISF, or what we call internal service funds, so that when critical needs are needed, we can jump to those, but more importantly, just to try and maintain our normal facilities so that they don't become critical. Animal shelter is a little bit unique because it's borne by necessity and need, that in essence the community is either bringing way too many animals to that particular facility. So we have a multi-phased approach that we implemented through your approval a year ago, but there still is phase 3 and 4 that are unfunded. And once those funds become available, we can then migrate to the west and continue to build out.
But that's what I mean, like when the funds become available for that, like, because the funds can become available for the city. Say, for instance, Delgado writes you a check for $20 million. That's funds become available to the city. I know. Well, I do. I write you a check, right? And so that becomes funds to the city. How do you prioritize that? Like, and I know there's other priorities, but you know what I mean? How does that?
So right now for facilities, mainly we're using DIF facilities for expansion, or facility reserves for our maintenance. Really on something like that, it would be a grant that would come before council. You would accept the award and we would go ahead and program that. Even you writing a $20 million check, we would have to bring that to council based on the donation policy. have you accept the donation or award, and then we would program that based on priorities. Staff would come back with a recommendation as to where to potentially place those funds, as far as what project on the CIP, and then it becomes a decision on the dais. Unfortunately, we do not have donors that just write $20 million checks, and more often or not, we have funding sources that are coming in that are truly dedicated. A lot of it's to transportation and so forth. Some of these other projects we just cannot get funding for. And if we do put in an application for some funding, like an animal shelter, dog park, those types of things, a lot of times what happens with some of these grants is we only get partially funded. So we'll put in something for a $5 million request and we only get less than $1 million. Well, now all of a sudden we're on the clock because there are certain requirements to spend that money, but now we're also going through and trying to find other funding. And staff is doing the best they can in working with our various consultants, TPA, California Consulting, and Blaze and Associates, to find grants and write grant applications to try and find that type of funding.
And I appreciate that, and I appreciate the fact that amongst other important items that that are on that list, the animal shelter is still on there. So, thank you.
Brian, I have a question. Are sidewalks part of the street and highways? Because, you know, there's a lot of streets in Edgemont without sidewalks.
Yes, sidewalks are part of the public works funding, and there is specific funding through gas tax, Measure A, that we're able to do sidewalks and so forth. The problem with, so a lot of times in our sidewalks, what we're doing right now is the sidewalks are already established and we're doing ADA upgrades. When you don't have a sidewalk there are additional costs with, one, getting potential easements to bring property, take property, bring it over so that we can actually cut into a sidewalk and so forth. So you have those types of acquisition costs. And then in Edgemont, we're also then dealing with the various utility in that particular area as well.
Thank you. Councilmember Gonzalez.
I noticed for the undergrounding of infrastructure, is there a reason why it's blank, or there's just no priority currently?
It's blank because it's very expensive to do so. So we would like all of our utility to be below ground. Most of that utility is not our assets, they're SCE. We work with them to try and do undergrounding within their sphere of influence or their jurisdiction. There is certain funding that we typically have to have. There's certain funding that we get from the SCE, it's part of their rate structure, but by the time we're able, in order to build a fund balance so that we can utilize it on a project, there's years that it has to build up. Undergrounding, you're typically looking at $1 to $2 million for a quarter mile. I mean, it's expensive. So that's why, although we show it as something that is a priority, there's just no funding for it at this particular point in time.
Thank you.
And if I may add on to that, great questions from my colleagues here. The undergrounding of utilities is something that has come up recently with the wildfires and these conversations that we're having in Sacramento. That's one of the asks is if the state can, we know they're dealing with budget issues, but wherever it's feasible and possible to allocate funding to local municipalities to help us underground, especially these electrical lines that are running across the state. It's just a thought that came to my mind. And I have a couple of questions, going back actually to follow up on Councilmember Delgado's question. about how these projects get funded and, you know, which ones get funded first. City Manager, could you speak a little bit also to maybe some of the big picture changes that we've seen more recently over the past couple years, as far as before it was a lot more, if I could say, open-ended or flexible as far as which projects would get funded. But over time, the state and federal government has gotten stricter on prioritizing certain projects, such as which ones are shovel-ready, or are you partnering with another government entity, you know, things like that. Can you speak a little bit to how these formulas have changed and what these higher level governments are looking for?
Sure. In past decades, the various funding sources that we have are obviously federal and state. A lot of times, federal will actually pass through the state. So you have federal transportation. A lot of times that's going through the state and comes down to us. So a lot of times those particular formulas were predicated on a certain methodology that have changed over time because of demographics, the number of residents in a given capita. Because funding is so scarce nowadays, you have new formulas that are coming out that are in the application process that is so competitive that now they're requiring partnering with regional commissions, whether it be transportation or COGS, and trying to have this scarce resource touch a multitude of jurisdictions as opposed to just what we would have done in the past, just apply on our own. And, you know, what used to be pretty much standard where you would get an allocation, that allocation is already off the top, and now it's all completely competitive. So that's where a lot of times you have, like Melissa as an example, utilizing RCTC as a regional transportation commission. She's constantly in communication with them and trying to ensure that our projects are moved up the list with every meeting and so forth. If you recall, they just approved a new project list. They were potentially going out for funding sources for that project list. Well, originally, when that project list came out, for some reason, all of our 60 corridor exchanges, overchanges were off the list. Have to contact them. So it's just being diligent with some of those particular regional boards, even WRCOG. You know, we work with WRCOG regionally so that we can capitalize on at least getting something from a grant. So those things have changed. But I think the biggest thing is that it's just become more competitive, and everybody is gotten, their experience level is higher. They're utilizing the same consultants. So a lot of times you have consultants writing applications for a multitude of jurisdictions, and they're basically competing against themselves.
Thank you very much for expounding on that. Really appreciate it. Just to really show how things have changed over time, as you said in your words, with resources becoming more scarce, especially funding becoming more competitive. Next question, actually kind of a two-parter. First, maybe to use an example, the city just yesterday was announced that Riverside County received $184 million for the RUHS Cactus Campus here in Moreno Valley, which is great. That's a lot of money. So very, very glad to see that the county was awarded the funding. The city supported it. And so the question is, you know, a part of that project, I don't know the specifics of the plans and all of that, but a lot, if not most, of the projects that come to the city, developments, for example, whether it be residential, commercial, industrial, oftentimes as part of the project, they're required to do certain public improvements like sidewalks or curb and gutter, things of that nature. The list that is currently on the screen, these costs or anticipated costs, does this also include potential improvements that could be done as part of a private development?
No, this particular list is literally just city projects that are mainly for maintenance and street rehab, refurbishment, ADA compliance. It's all of the various assets that we already have out in the city and just being able to maintain them. What you're referring to in developers having to be, well, developers being conditioned to putting in certain infrastructure, whether it be, you know, sewer lines for when they do a new street, sewer lines for EMWD, water lines and so forth. So you have all of these various easements as part of the development. They're putting in the street, the sidewalks, curb and gutter, the hydrants and so forth. Poles and for streetlights and this and that. All of those developments that a developer is supposed to put in, ultimately what happens is after that development is done, after there is a certain period of time that they have to maintain, it's a warranty period, we then absorb all of those assets that is particular to our jurisdiction. Well, now all those assets have to be maintained in the future. And so that just continues to compound on our 2.4 billion unfunded liabilities or for our projects. But that's why when I mentioned that we're over $1 billion municipal corporation is because our assets continue to grow. Well, those assets have a useful life, and a lot of times that useful life is driving the decisions for us as to what we need to maintain and when we need to maintain it.
Thank you. And a question on this, and then also the other lists as far as anticipated costs. Is this in today's dollars? This is inflation adjusted to today?
Yes.
So it could potentially probably go up over time.
Most definitely. So you're looking at unfunded. This is a 5-year plan. So this is on a 5-year trajectory, rolling every 2 cycles, so every biennial cycle. And so every cycle we take a look at new projects that are being put on, projects that dropped off, projects that are still on there. We take a look at it in a snapshot in time at those dollars, in that day's dollar. But by the time some of those unfunded projects get to production and development, some of these bridges that we're trying to estimate now, that's why it's so difficult with funding. You're looking at an overcrossing that could cost 40, 50 million, and we're estimating today and trying to get funding from all our regional partners. And come next year, when we go bid it out, it could be, 30% more just because of inflationary costs, what's occurring on a macroeconomic basis.
Yeah, thank you. And then lastly, 2 things, more of a comment, not really a question, but I remember back years ago when Fire Chief Ahmad was still here. I remember it like it was just yesterday. We talked, one of the projects that we talked about, and I believe is on the CIP, correct me if I'm wrong on this one, is the Hecock Channel, the potential bridge to connect the city of Moreno Valley to the city of Paris through Hecock Street. I remember that was on the CIP, but of course costs is always the big one and trying to secure grants. So just wanted to make sure that that's something on there because obviously for circulation it's important, but the number one most important reason would be for public safety, for police and fire to be able to access, that corridor. So just, I don't know if the list is coming back, so hopefully that's something that's still somewhere on that list.
Yeah, so you will see it as an unfunded project, in trying to partner with the city of Paris and with their north side or north end fire station, and trying to anticipate some of the apparatuses they're bringing up into the north end, trying to partner with them to say, okay, it's time to push through. And along with, WRCOG, RCTC, trying to find funding. But yes, from a public safety perspective, that is a key corridor and is still a priority for not only law enforcement, but for fire prevention as well, because there could be better response times, whether north or south, for Paris and Moreno Valley.
Absolutely. I have one more, but I think Councilmember Gonzalez has a question.
I just added in, if my math is right here, if I add the totals here, so this means our project requests are almost 6% of the unfunded of 2.4 billion. That's what I have, but it's just a scale, right? We're only it's only a drop in the bucket from the 2.4.
It is, and that's
Yeah.
typically what we say. But on this one here, this one is just broken by down by district. And although we do show a citywide, there is another section that kind of shows a different list. So yes, so here's the true list.
Yeah,
So
137 million.
this is the list that we identify, and this is how I would equate to our true number. We have $137 million that experts are telling us we need today. And again, due to scarce resources on the funding side, we can only do X. And so therefore, that's what I really would look at, because now you really see what potentially is going into deferred maintenance. So whatever that delta difference is between what we're able to fund and what the needs assessment from all of these master plans and needs assessment reports and so forth, that is what we are in essence deferring to future maintenance, which just means that the cost to maintain those assets now just got more expensive.
I just divided the 137 into 2.4 billion, and it's about 6%. So
Okay.
yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then my last one, more of a feel-good one, and I'll throw his name out there because he's a good guy. Principal Quintero. I'm not sure. I think he's still a principal, just at a different school. But March. Yeah, he's at Moreno Valley High School now, but he was previously at March High School. I think it's March Mountain High School, over off of Dracia. Actually, it's actually in District 1. For years, it's kind of a joke, but it's not. He's been asking to put some kind of lighting along Dracia for the safety of the students and the parents. And every time he sees me, he lets me hear it. Like, how's that going? When is that getting installed? So I just wanted to throw that out there because I told him, look, before I leave office, I promise you I'm going to do everything in my power, God willing, to get those lights installed for you. So I promised him I would ask about it again. So.
Well, and thank you for that. Just so you know, that lighting feature along that particular street is not the traditional lighting. Those are actually solar lights. And so because of the cost of all of these various materials that we use, staff is doing a great job in when they go to various conferences, when they're reading their technical literature, what is being used as best practice in various jurisdictions that just aren't in the state of California, but are nationwide, or in some cases that are worldwide, just to get a sense as to what other jurisdictions are doing to see if there's a way that we can do it better and cheaper. And so us being in California and the plethora of sunlight that we typically have, they're able to utilize these solar lights where typical infrastructure is not available.
Excellent. So Principal Quintero, promised, and doing my best to deliver, sir. So that's all I have. I took up a lot of time looking to my colleagues to see if there's any other questions, any other comments. Doesn't look like we have any more. And that was the only item we had on the agenda. So we'll go ahead and move into item G, which is adjournment, and we'll officially adjourn this this study session at 6:35 p.m. Have a good night.